I would like to open this event by recognizing that McGill University is on land which long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose presence have enriched this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. Avant de donner le coup d'envoi à cet événement, permettez-moi de souligner que l'Université McGill est située sur un territoire qui a longtemps été un lieu de rencontre et d'échange pour les peuples autochtones, notamment pour les nations Haudenosaunee et Anishinaabe. Nous saluons et remercions les divers peuples autochtones qui ont enrichi de leur présence ce territoire, lequel accueille aujourd'hui des gens de partout dans le monde.
Bonsoir à tous. Buenas tardes. My name is Mark Weinstein, and I'm the Vice Principal, University Advancement at McGill. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this joint event for McGill Young Alumni and the McGill Latino Alumni Society at Bicentennial At Home Homecoming 2021. It is so rewarding for me to see our McGill Alumni Network grow further with the launch of the McGill Latino Alumni Society, which is kicking off with this event tonight. Your future contributions to the engagement of McGill students and alumni from the Latino community with their alma mater will be very much appreciated by all of us, and I hope it is an equally rewarding experience for you. Likewise, it is always a treat for me to stay connected with our McGill Young Alumni, one of the most vibrant and enthusiastic alumni groups with a long history of engaging young graduates. McGill gets a great deal of support from its young alumni, whether it's their participation in the programs we offer or during events like McGill 24, the university's annual Day of Giving, when we always see a huge response from many of you online. That response is deeply appreciated and helps support current and future students and their experiences at McGill. We hope you will continue to stay engaged with us as the Made by McGill campaign rolls on into McGill's third century and we celebrate our bicentennial. It's a special time for our university. For 200 years, McGill has achieved great milestones in discovery and research. Our community has made enduring contributions to science, culture, business, the arts, and every facet of our changing world. That community, which includes all of you, continues to make a positive difference to our society. And that really is something to celebrate. Speaking of community, as members of the McGill Alumni Association, I hope that you take advantage of all the services we offer for young grads as well, from mentoring and networking opportunities to help you develop in your careers to great events featuring talented alumni like this online gathering tonight. I would also like to note that while we are meeting online for this event, we recognize that McGill University is located on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. McGill acknowledges and thanks the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence has enriched this territory on which peoples of the world now gather. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Abdel Mazar Shafi, President of McGill Young Alumni. Abdel graduated in 2014 with a Bachelor of Engineering degree, and he is founder and partner at Quantum Lead in Montreal. He was recently selected to serve as a Canadian delegate for Futurepreneur Canada at the G20 Young Entrepreneurs Alliance Summit in Milan this year. Co-hosting this event with Abdel is Pedro Zaya, president and founder of the McGill Latino Alumni Society. Pedro graduated in 2019 with a BA and is currently an advisor at the International Economic Forum of the Americas. And of course, we have our featured speaker, author, and McGill graduate, Daniel Aleman, about whom you will hear more from your hosts. Take it away, Abdel and Pedro.
Thank you, Vice Principal Weinstein. Bonsoir à tous. Good evening, everyone. My name is Abdel Mazar Shafi, and I'm the president of the McGill Young Alumni. Our association's aim is to connect, support, and engage McGill students and graduates of the last decade through flagship events like this. I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to McGill's second at-home homecoming. Although it'd be great to see all of you in person, we are delighted to be able to celebrate this momentous occasion together virtually. We've got a fantastic event planned for all of you this evening. We will hear from a superstar McGill Young alum in Daniel Aleman, who just last year published his debut young adult novel, Indivisible. You, as the audience, will have the chance to engage in an intimate Q&A with him. We will then split into smaller groups through virtual breakout rooms to give you a chance to network before we part ways. This evening is made all the more special through the launch of our new alumni group. McGill Young Alumni is honored to co-host tonight's event with the brand new McGill Latino Alumni Society for its homecoming debut. It is a privilege to be co-hosting tonight with Pedro Zaya, the founder and president of the McGill Latino Society, who will tell you more about this important group. Pedro, the proverbial mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Abdel. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Weinstein, and thank you, Abdel, for the presentation, and thank you to the McGill Young Alumni for co-hosting this first event with the McGill Latino Alumni Society. As mentioned, I am Pedro Zaya, president of the newly founded MLAS. This initiative was born out of the rising awareness of Latin American and Caribbean heritage in Canada, Quebec, and Montreal, and out of the realization that there is a need for Latino students and alumni of McGill to maintain contact with the university and each other, to share their unique experiences, engage in relevant and diverse opportunities for professional growth and development. It is with great pleasure that I participate in today's event, along with Abdel and an outstanding Latino alumnus, Daniel Aleman. Abdel will make the proper introductions after me, but I just wanted to highlight Daniel Aleman's most recent book, Indivisible. As a good McGillian, I did my homework and read the readings. And I must be honest, this book is a brilliantly written roller coaster of emotion that gets you hooked from the very first few pages. From descriptions of the cold, harsh, and unforgiving realities of undocumented immigrant families living in the United States to the tender and heartwarming moments where the main character, Mateo, realizes that even in the darkest hours, he has a support network and people around him that will get out of their way to help him. One particular moment in the book really melted my heart, and it's when, right after Mateo's family is detained, several members of the Latino community in his neighborhood pay him a visit at his parents' bodega to fill him to the brim with food, as Latinos love to do, and with help offers. If there's one message I want to end with, and it would be this one: one does not have to go through life's harshest moments alone. Like the Latino community depicted in Daniel's book, the MLAS wants to be there to help and guide Latino students and alumni through professional and personal development. I'll stop talking now, and thank you very much again, and I'll turn it back to you, Abdel.
Thank you, Pedro. I was going to say you've done already such a great job in setting up the stage, so I won't take too much time and get us on to the main event. Our keynote speaker this evening is fellow McGillian Daniel Aleman. You see him smiling and beaming across your virtual screens. He's a celebrated author of the hit young adult novel, Indivisible. He'll share in his own words his journey of how he arrived at this moment and what it's like having a book that Buzzfeed has called one of the top LGBTQ plus books of 2021, and that Refinery 29 has labeled one of the 10 Latinx books it cannot wait to read. Grab yourself a beverage, get comfortable on your couch, pull out the homecoming party pack, social media your experience as you wish through the multiple platforms, tag us, and get ready for a fun and intellectual evening. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And I have to say thank you to the whole planning committee. You have been so wonderful, and I'm super grateful. And thank you to you if you are with us tonight, spending a little bit of your Friday evening with me. I'm super grateful. I would like to tell you a few stories tonight, mostly lessons that I think I've learned along the way. And the first one is about the power of storytelling, not just the stories that we tell other people, but the stories we tell ourselves. The second one is about the importance of asking for help when you need it and about the power of vulnerability. And the third one is about the importance of failure and the ways in which we can reshape how we view our obstacles. So allow me to begin by telling you that I've been a storyteller my whole life. So even before I could actually read and write, I could barely just hold a crayon, and I would make little drawings on a piece of paper. And then I would tell my mother the story behind those drawings. And sometimes I would ask her to write the story out for me on the back of the paper. I remember one, it was a picture of a girl in a blue dress. And the story was that she was a princess who was going to get married. And she didn't know that most brides wear white on their wedding day. And so she had bought a blue dress instead. And she was very stressed about that. So you can see there were very, very simple stories, but they were stories nonetheless. And I went on to write my first short stories that were about 10 pages in length by the time I was 7 or 8 years old. And I wrote my first full-length novel at age 11, which I can tell you was not very good. But again, it was a fully developed story with a plot and with characters and conflict and all of the elements of craft. And so for the longest time, this has been something that I've done out of pure love and out of pure passion for storytelling. I honestly don't know who I would be if I didn't have this ability to write and to make sense of my world and to tell stories. And I do think all along, I had it in the back of my mind that I wanted to be a published author. In fact, I stood in front of my 6th grade class and I said that my biggest dream in the whole world was to see my name on the front cover of a book. And that was a dream that came true last year, which was just so wonderful. But, you know, when the time came to go to university and to pick a major, I did consider going into like a literature program or a creative writing program. But my parents, being good immigrant parents, they wanted me and my siblings to have the safest life possible. And I didn't disagree with them. I fully felt like going into a business program was the right decision for me. And later on, I realized just how much I learned and how much everything that I got out of McGill has helped me in my journey as a writer and even in an artistic journey, because at the end of the day, publishing is a business. But I actually, after all those years of telling stories out of pure passion, I started to look into the possibility of, sending my book out to potentially be published. And I won't bore you with all the details of how publishing works, but in short, the way that the process is you need a literary agent to represent your work. And then that is the person who basically sends your book out to publishers. Without an agent, you can't really contact any major publishers. They don't take unagented submissions. So it's really, really important to have that right advocate. And as you can imagine, so many people write books and so many people submit their work to agents. So, reputable literary agents receive hundreds and thousands of submissions every month or every year. And so I was actually a McGill student when I started to send my book out to literary agents. And unsurprisingly, I started to get all of these rejections. And I remember very vividly, I was sitting around the breakfast table with my family. It was a winter break during my McGill years, and I was telling my family about, my journey of sending my book out to agents and all these rejections and all of this. And I remember my dad turned to me and he said, Daniel, I know how important this is to you, and I know how badly you want to be a published author. But if it doesn't happen for you, I also don't want it to kind of like destroy you. I don't want it to hold you back for the rest of your life. And I remember looking at him and saying, you're not wrong. It is 1 in a million, but there's no reason why I couldn't be that one. And looking back on that moment, I think that something very powerful was happening, which was that I was telling a story, not just to other people, not just to my family, but I was telling a story to myself. I was telling myself that I was going to do it, that, no matter all the rejections, all the, hardship that may come with pursuing a creative field, I was going to eventually make it. And I think that that's really, really powerful. And I think that it's really, really important to ask ourselves what stories are we telling? What stories are we telling to those around us? But mostly, what are we telling ourselves about our objectives and about our dreams? Are we telling ourselves that we can do it? Are we telling ourselves that, even if we fail, we're going to find a way, we're going to keep going? Or are we telling ourselves it's too hard, it's 1 in a million? And I think that once we start to tell ourselves the right stories, something incredible happens, which is that we start to make decisions. We start to make decisions on a daily basis. And it can be the big decisions of, should I go into this MBA program? Should I apply for it? Or should I move to this city? Or it can be the tiny decisions of, should I sleep in for another 15 minutes? Or should I wake up and get a little bit of work done on my novel before I head to the office? And slowly but surely, I think that as long as we're telling ourselves the right stories, we do get there. We get to where we need to be. So I would encourage you, first lesson that I learned on my journey is to ask ourselves these questions of what stories are we telling, what our objectives are, and how are we envisioning our objectives, and how are we, making decisions slowly but surely to get to them. The second lesson that I wanted to share with you is actually something that Pedro very beautifully explained, a theme in the book, which is asking for help when we need it, and the power of vulnerability. It's really, really funny to write a novel and to write, fiction, because you're creating these, imaginary situations, and you're creating these imaginary characters. And oftentimes, as the author, you don't realize just how much of yourself you're putting on the page. And so when I started writing Indivisible, I set out to write a story about immigration. I set out to write a story about deportation. And I was, I think, very focused on the plot and on the characters, but I wasn't very much thinking about the themes until later on when I signed with my literary agent. And he read the book and he said to me, Daniel, you have very powerful themes here about asking for help when you need it. And at that time, I was like, oh yeah, like totally, that was intentional, but it really wasn't. I looked back and I read the book and I realized, like, in fact, I had put all of this on the page. I had given my main character a journey, an emotional journey of starting off in a place where he was very, I think, closed off from the world and very unable to ask for help and to speak up. And he learned slowly but surely that help is available when you need it, and that it is important to look around yourself and to notice all the ways in which people are there for you, and all the ways in which help is available when you're able to use your voice to ask for it. And in fact, I want to read just one really quick quote, which is one of my favorites in the book, which says, I've never regretted asking for help when I've needed it. Sometimes the only way to be strong is to let some other people carry the weight with you. And I think that, similarly to my main character, I started off in a place where I didn't want to share my work with people. I was very afraid of rejection. I was very afraid to be laughed at. I was very afraid of being told that I wasn't good enough or that I wasn't going to be able to become a writer. And what I found was that once I started to open up to people and once I started to ask for help and reach out to others, that was when the magic started happening. And one such example is Professor Lindsay Holmgren, who I see is here today. Because I came to McGill and I was in my second semester. And I remember Professor Lindsay Holmgren's class, which was Expressive Analysis for Management, was, I think, my favorite course at McGill. It taught me so much about the power of language. It taught me so much about the power of words and how we can utilize words to say exactly what we want to say. And I think, I learned so much from Professor Holmgren, but the most beautiful thing happened not in the classroom, but later on when I went to her office. And I said to her, I want to be a writer. And I don't think I had really said that to many people at McGill. Because again, I was scared that people weren't going to take me seriously or that I was going to hear things that I didn't want to hear. And Professor Holmgren was someone who looked at me and said, you know what? Yes, let's help you do that. How can we help? And Professor Holmgren read my pitch to agents. She helped me polish it. She put me in contact with one of her author friends who also gave me a lot of insight into the industry. And I think that, you know, just as Professor Holmgren marked my journey, I think that there were so many people who helped me in ways both big and small. And I think that once we start to look around ourselves and to, you know, ask for help, we do find that help is available if and when we need it. And lastly, I want to talk, this is my favorite topic to talk about, and it is failure and the way in which we can reshape how we view our obstacles. So in storytelling, there is a formula kind of that applies to basically every single movie or book that you've read, anything, you know, commercial fiction. It has a formula. You have three elements. You need to have a character, you need to have an objective, and you need to have an obstacle. And so basically your character needs to want something and then they can't have it. And that's what makes for a compelling story. That is what keeps us, you know, reading until 2 a.m. to find out what's going to happen. That is what makes us go to the movies to see if the hero is going to save the world, or if the, you know, in a romance, if this couple is going to end up together. And it is really the obstacles that make the story. And I think that once we start to think of the obstacles in our way, once we start to think about them as an opportunity and as something that can teach us a lot of valuable lessons and that can help us grow, I also think that our whole landscape, like our whole outlook changes. This takes me back to my story of how I was looking for an agent. So again, I was about 20 years old at McGill. I had just finished writing a book that I was really proud of. And I said to myself, let me send this out to agents and let me see if, you know, anyone wants to sign me. And so I tried with my first book, and that went nowhere. Like I probably sent it to 60 people. I received 60 rejections. And then I said to myself, you know, what I will say about failure in publishing especially is that it can destroy a lot of people. I know writers who have been completely just destroyed by the failure and the constant rejection. And I think that, you know, as long as you don't see failure as something final, as long as you don't think to yourself, oh, my first book didn't work out and let me try again, I think that there's nothing that can stop you. So after my first book didn't make it anywhere, I said to myself, I'm going to write a second one. And so I sent that book out to agents. And then I received a couple of, you know, requests from people who wanted to read more. And again, it ended in all rejections. Like no one wanted that in the end. But I said to myself, okay, again, I'm not going to let this stop me. And so I wrote a third book. And then I got a lot of responses from literary agents. I got about 20 positive responses from people who wanted to read the whole book. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this has got to be it. You know, 1 out of 20 people, like one of these people needs to assign me. And it ended up being that I got 20 out of 20 rejections. And there was one especially that was, I think, the most heartbreaking rejection that I've ever received in my life. So it came from a very reputable literary agent who really loved the book. And she wrote back to me saying, I love this story. But I'm not ready to sign you. So this is what is known as a revise and resubmit request in publishing. So she sent to me notes to work on. And she said to me, if you're willing to make these revisions, then send it back to me and I'll reconsider. And so I worked on those revisions for 5 months. I was so anxious. And then I sent it back to her and I waited for a month. And she got back to me saying, you know, Daniel, you did a great job with the revisions. I love what you did here. Unfortunately, after talking to other people at my agency, we still don't feel that that this is something that we can sell at this time. Like, it's not right for the market at this time. And that rejection, you know, having been so close and then having it not work out, that was incredibly painful. And I let it hurt a lot for a week. And then literally, I'm not even exaggerating, a week later was when I started writing what would become Indivisible. And it took me about 4 or 5 months to finish the manuscript. And then it all started happening super, super quickly. I received 4 different offers from different agents. After, you know, all of those years of rejections, it was really special and really wonderful to be able to to choose the person that I wanted to work with. And you know what, I think that had it not been because of those years that I spent trying and failing and trying and failing, I wouldn't have been ready for what was waiting for me later on. Because at the time that I signed with my agent, I thought to myself, this is it. I've made it past all the obstacles. I've made it past all the failure. I've gotten to where I wanted to be. But there was a lot still to come. So what happened at that time was that me and my agent, we edited the book for about a month, and then we submitted it to publishers. And publishers are also, editors are also very busy people. They receive dozens and dozens of books every week. So it tends to take them a lot of time to read books and to get back to you with a response. And what happened with Indivisible was that we submitted it on a Thursday, and by Friday, 24 hours later, we had 2 editors who had read the whole book and who wanted to acquire it. And so it was like a dream come true in that sense, because when there's a competitive situation, your book goes to auction typically. Or what can happen is that a publisher can make like a bully offer, or like a preemptive offer, which is what happened in the case of Indivisible. Disney Publishing made an offer for $500,000, and we accepted it on the spot. And I felt like for the following year, it was that dream come true. It was all so beautiful and perfect, and I was so happy and grateful. And then things started to kind of go wrong. So I received an email in December of 2019 from my agent saying that my editor, who I had been working with for the past year, was leaving my publisher. So she had accepted a different position at a different publisher. And of course, I was so thrilled for her. It was such a wonderful career move. But at the same time, as the author, you're kind of left in a limbo. Like, you're scared that like your next editor may not understand your vision as well as your first one did, or that, you know, you're losing a big advocate. And I was like, okay, this is just a bump in the road. We're going to move on from this. It's going to be okay. And so I was assigned a new editor at Disney, and she was wonderful. We worked together for a couple of months. And then I opened my email, and this was all pre-pandemic. This was like February 2020. I opened my email to find a note that said, "Welcome to your new publisher." And it came out that I thought initially that it was like an elaborate phishing scam, because the email said that Little Brown and the Hachette Book Group had acquired over 1,000 titles from Disney, including my own. And it turned out to be true. And so it turned out that I had to switch publishers, and I lost my whole team. Like, I had just lost my editor, then I lost my second editor, I lost my publicity team, my marketing team, everything kind of went up in the air. And so I transitioned over to Little Brown, and my new editor, she read the book. It was finalized at that time. We had finished edits. The book was almost ready to go to print. And my editor read it, and she said, you know, I have some ideas. Like, I have some ideas to make the second half of the book better. And she asked me, are you willing to go back to edits? And I was so hesitant, because I think that once you've finished the book, that thought of reopening it and the thought of going back to it is just the worst that could possibly happen. But I agreed. I said, you know what? Let's do it. Let's turn this into the best book that it can possibly be. And so we reopened the manuscript, we started working on edits, and we got at that time a notification that Indivisible had been selected for a very, very prestigious award, so to speak, for the Book Expo America, which is the biggest book expo in the world, I believe. It had been selected as a buzz pick, which meant that they wanted to highlight it as like a breakout title of the year. And it was going to come with a lot of publicity, with like a shiny invitation to New York City to speak in front of a room full of reporters and book fans. And because we had decided to go back to edits, we were no longer eligible for that award because the book was not going to be ready. It was not going to be printed in time for the expo. And that was, again, just a heartbreaking moment, and a heartbreaking moment of failure and of feeling like an opportunity had slipped away. But still, I focused on my edits and I focused on working on the book. And then March 2020 came along. And as we all know, the world went into lockdown. And it just completely changed the industry, because I had gone from, this dream situation of having a great publisher behind me and having a great having a great book deal and having a publication date even. And I went from that to this very, very uncertain situation of, I'm with a new team, I'm working on edits again. I don't even know if this book is going to make it out into the world anymore, because, publishing is kind of a mess. Like, bookstores are closed. People are not really reading new books. All events were canceled, like in-person signings, in-person events were canceled. It was just a very uncertain time for publishing. And afterward, I just told myself, I just got to focus on finishing the book. And so I did. I finished edits. I turned them into my editor. And, I look back on like all of these highs and lows and all of these obstacles. And I truly think to myself that had my journey been really smooth, had my first book that I pitched to agents been the one that I got signed with for, or had, I received an offer from a publisher and then had a smooth journey, as most authors do, who, work with their editor for many books and many years and remain with their same publisher. And I think to myself, like, that would have been so boring. Like, if we think to ourselves, what I was mentioning earlier, just the way that movies are set up, the way that books are set up, in which we watch a character overcome obstacles to reach their objectives. I think that these were the obstacles that I needed to overcome. And these obstacles made me who I am, and they made the book what it is. And they gave me so much perspective, and they made me appreciate the successes so much more. And so I think that it can be frustrating often when we have clear objectives and when we look ahead at the things that we want to do, and we see those obstacles, and we hear people telling us, it's 1 in a million, or we hear people telling us, no, this is, not good enough, or you're not talented enough. And it's so frustrating and it's so hard. But I think that once we think about these obstacles as opportunities, it all changes too, because they are opportunities to grow. Without obstacles, we can't learn, we can't gain perspective, we can't become who we need to be. And so I really, really encourage those of us watching tonight to take a look at your obstacles, at the obstacles ahead of you, and the things that are preventing you from getting what you want, and start to think of them a little differently, and start to think of them perhaps as opportunities to become the person that you need to be. And I am so, so, so grateful to all of you for listening to me. And I am so happy to answer questions and to continue our conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. You have said a lot of stuff. I've been taking rigorous notes of what you've been saying. We're going to get back to those, but first I would like to start with questions from the public. And there's one I particularly like, and it's about staying true to yourself. And you mentioned that in several occasions you had to go back and, like, for instance, reopening the manuscript because at a very late stage your publisher says, we might need to change something
Right.
In order to make it better. So how do you stay true to yourself as an author? And are you ever afraid to not be your authentic self, especially when you have this really good initial idea, but then you start hearing, like you said, your publisher, your editor, maybe some other person that read your manuscript. How do you deal with that?
I think that the main thing is that I've always done it for me first. And I've always told myself, the money is a nice consequence, but this is not something that I do for that reason. I do this because I love storytelling and because I love writing and because I love language. And so I think that as long as you have that clear, your heart is in the right place and you're doing something because you genuinely want to, I think that also changes your perspective a lot, because the minute you start doing things for other people and to please other people, that doesn't lead to the best results. And so even in those situations, even when I was asked, are you willing to go back to edits? I asked myself, do I think that I can be better? And do I think that my book can be better and that I can, stay true to my vision and do it for me, but also, incorporate these notes into my manuscript? And if the answer is yes, then absolutely go ahead and do it.
Excellent. I don't want to monopolize the questions, but I have a follow-up to this one, and I'll leave it to you after, Abdel. How do you realize you're improving as an author? How do you realize that? How do you realize it yourself? Not because others are saying so, but how do you realize it yourself? And I find it, especially when you're facing a blank page. How do you realize that?
Well, I will say that is, I think, when relying on others becomes important, because I think that oftentimes we can be blind to our own abilities or to our own talent. And you can be blind, even if you're great, you could be a fantastic artist or fantastic at whatever field you're in and not realize it because you're just in your own head. And I do think that it takes a certain amount of vulnerability and a certain amount of power to reach out to other people and ask them, what do you think? And it's not just about reaching out to anybody and everybody, because everyone's going to have a different opinion. And there will be people who tell you, oh, you suck. But you got to look around and find those people that you trust and find those people that won't necessarily tell you what you want to hear, that will be honest with you, but that will also help you see more objectively and help you see things more clearly. And like I mentioned, I think Professor Holmgren was one of those people for me, because before going into her office, I had never shown anybody anything. I had never let anybody read anything that I had written. And I came into her office saying, I have this pitch letter to send to literary agents. And I want to know if it's good. I want to know if I could make it better. And it was with her guidance and with her, because she was kind to me and because she was encouraging and she helped me nurture that passion and that talent, and that I was able to gain the confidence to be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna submit this. And even if it led to, negative results, even if it didn't lead to getting signed by an agent with that particular manuscript, I think that I became so much stronger as a result of asking for help. And I gained so much perspective thanks to, the fact that I kind of let down my guard a little bit and said, maybe I can't do it all on my own. Maybe I do need help, and maybe I do need to go to other people for encouragement and for inspiration and for feedback.
I just want to dive into that a little bit deeper, Daniel, because a lot of the questions we're getting are obviously from people who are interested in either publishing themselves or already going through that process. You mentioned the importance of asking for help, relying on others. So could you describe for a new author or someone who wants to become an author, how do you identify the people you need on your team? And how do you go about recruiting the right individuals to help you succeed?
For me, I think it has been a mix of so many different people. Like one of the people that reads my work always, like anything I read before my agency, anything I write, I mean, before my agent sees it, before anyone else reads it, is my mom. And I trust her. The reason I trust my mom to tell me the truth is that she once read a book that I wrote, and she told me, Daniel, this is not great. This is not the best that you can do. And I think that was when, and she told it to me in a nice way, because we each need feedback in our own way. Sometimes, and we each need to understand how like what it is that we need when we ask for feedback. So it may be the case that you're okay with very harsh feedback and very direct, like, no, this is not good. Or sometimes we need a bit more of a cheerleader. And sometimes we need someone to tell us, like, you can do it, you can be better. And I think, first of all, understanding what type of feedback we're looking for at any given moment. Perhaps at the earlier stages of your artistic career, you're going to need more that type of encouraging feedback. And so go to people that you trust, go to people that you know are going to be kind to you. And so ask friends, family that you know have a similar taste as you. If my dad reads like political thrillers and I have a very emotional young adult novel, perhaps he's not the right person to ask. But if my mom loves the same kinds of books as me, then maybe she is a great person to go to for feedback. So I would say definitely start in your own circle. If you have, as I did, a professor that you trust, a professor that you can reach out to. There's also great communities online. Twitter is a great place to find a writing community. And I've in fact met so many of my current writing friends through Twitter. It's just a matter of slowly but surely letting people in, and slowly but surely understanding who to let in. And sometimes you can sometimes you can reach out to someone and they turn out not to be the right person to give you feedback. And it's also a matter of understanding when the feedback works for you and when it doesn't. And sometimes if someone tells you, I've had people tell me, I really don't like this. And again, I have to ask myself, do they not like it because it's bad or because it's just not for them? And I think that you have to draw a line there, and it comes with experience. It comes with like little by little, you start to understand who to trust. And I do recommend starting in your close circle.
You mentioned writing your own story. Mm-hmm. And changing your own narrative. I want to dive a little bit more into that. What is a moment? Can you tell us a moment where your story, your way of seeing, has dramatically changed? It gave a 180. It was a moment that you were like, but of course this makes sense. It always made sense, but why was I not seeing it this way? How did this moment like change your own story, the way you tell your story?
I do think that currently I have the benefit of perspective, and I can sit here and tell you all about how I was telling myself that right story, and I didn't know it at the time. Like I didn't see at the time objectively until now that I can look back and think to myself like, oh wow, I was so convinced that I was going to do it. I think, I'm going through a moment like that currently with my second book. So I am writing my second novel, and I am filled with doubt. I am so, I'm questioning everything. I'm questioning, are, the people who liked my first book going to like this second one? Is my editor going to like this? Are they going to think this is trash and be like, no, sorry, Daniel, we can't publish this second novel? And I think that these are the moments when we need to take a close look at what we're telling ourselves. And it's a question that I've been asking myself recently. Like, am I doing this? Am I writing from a place of, enjoying it and doing it for me, or am I doing it for other people? And am I telling myself this second book is going to be a success and it's going to be the best book I've ever written? Or am I letting my doubts win? And am I letting those those questions of, what if I'm not good enough when? And those are the defining moments. It's like, it's so natural to question your objectives. It's so natural to question your dreams. And I think that when we do, it is important to kind of pull ourselves back and to tell ourselves, to remind ourselves why we do the things that we do and why, and tell ourselves that we can do it, and changing our mindset and telling yourself, yes, this is going to be a great book, and I've done it before and I can do it again.
So I'm an engineer and I wish I could write. I stare at that blank page sometimes, and you fantasize worlds and whatnot. The majority of our audience is just as curious as I am about this piece. Walk us through your writing process. When do you like to write? What inspires you to write? Does inspiration come at random? Is it surprising moments, or do you have this regimented schedule where you pump out your best work? Please just walk us through that a little bit.
I would say more than anything, I write about the things that keep me up at night. Like, I write about the things that I obsess about the things that, the big questions that I ask myself about who I am, about how I fit into my world, and about the way that certain things are the way they are. And I can, for Indivisible, for example, I had known for a long time that I wanted to write a book about immigration, because I am an immigrant. I was born and raised in Mexico City. My parents moved to the United States. I moved to Canada. We've been different places. And I, taking a close look at myself and my family, I did ask myself, like, why is it that things are the way they are for families that are, in some ways similar and in some ways different from ourselves? And so I knew I wanted to write about immigration, and I just didn't really know what the right angle would be for that story. And the way it happened, and this is how most of my book ideas happened, it just comes to me at a very random time. It was a winter evening. I was walking down the street and I had this image in my head, like, of a boy standing inside a New York City bodega who was feeling deeply upset about something. And these thoughts and these images come and go. I feel like it's also just a matter of habit. Like, because I lead a creative life, I constantly think of like random ideas, random emotions, random images. And most of them come and go. So most of them, I would have thought of that in that moment and it would have disappeared. And then there are things that keep coming back. And so for some reason that I cannot even explain, I kept coming back to that image of that boy standing inside that store feeling upset. And that's when I kind of know, like, okay, there's a story here. And what is a story? And so I kind of started piecing it together. I told myself, maybe this is the story about immigration that I've been wanting to tell. And maybe this is the reason why this kid is upset. And maybe this is why he's at the store. And that is how I slowly start to craft a story. And I start to ask myself, who are his friends? What is his life at school like? What is his life at home like? That is not to say that that is the only way to craft a story. I know writers who are much more intentional with their ideas. They sit down and they, think to themselves, I'm going to write a thriller about this and this and this. And your way is the right way. Like, there's no wrong way to start a story or to create a book. For me, I do like that intentional aspect of, this is kind of like the overall theme that I want to write about. And then waiting for, for those moments of crazy inspiration. And again, because I lead this creative life, I get that a lot. And I do think it's also a matter of habit. I write every single day. Every single day I write. It could be Christmas, it could be a weekend, it could be my birthday, I could be on vacation. I write every single day. Again, that is not to say that everyone should write every single day, but you have to find what works for you. You have to understand what routine would be best and then stick to it.
Just a quick follow-up question then, Daniel, and it sounds, obviously you mentioned the creative life, your process. Have you experienced writer's block? And more importantly, again, for our audience, how do you overcome sometimes a lack of ideas or progress in your story?
I would say there's two sides to that. So in terms of lack of ideas, I feel like when I feel a little blocked and when I think to myself, oh, I don't know what my next book is going to be about, I feel like letting go a little bit is what's best. So I think that when I stop obsessing over what my next book is going to be about, and when I tell myself, I'm just going to, give myself a break, and not write for the next 2 weeks, that's when I start to, the ideas just beg to, pop into my head. And also in terms of writer's block, once I actually am working on a manuscript, I think that the consistency helps a lot, because if I promise to myself that every single day I'm going to sit in front of my laptop and do a little bit of work, and I tell myself, it doesn't matter if I write 100 pages or one sentence, as long as I'm moving forward and as long as I'm making some sort of progress. And I think that's really, really important, just consistency. And it applies to really anything. As long as you're putting one sentence down or putting 5 minutes in every single day, eventually you're going to make progress.
Excellent. So you mentioned the fact that you're from Mexican, you lived in Mexico City. So how important is your cultural upbringing and what values to your work? So what's the importance of having grown in Mexico? Obviously different realities, but at the same time, Mexico City is such a marvelous place. Tell us what's the influence of having lived there?
I think it influences everything I do. And part of, why I wanted to write this story and why I wanted to write a gay Latino character in this book was that I feel like we don't often get to see, Latino characters. And sometimes when we do, the representation that we see is not great. Yeah. And I feel, I also feel that immigration is on the news so much, and we tend to hear about immigration and about Mexicans and about Latinos so much on the news. And that is a narrative that we've kind of become used to. Just hearing from this very cold perspective of immigrants and deportation and all of this. And I really wanted to come at it with a story that kind of broke through that, the way that we see these things represented in the news, and that came at it from a very human standpoint. And I wanted to see, families like mine, or families like so many Mexican families, or so many immigrant families. I wanted to see them represented on the page in a compassionate way and in a very human way. And I wanted to not necessarily talk about politics, but talk about the real life consequences of policy. And I think that in terms of values, there's so much that is in the book. I think family is super, super important. There's so much about, hard work. As an immigrant family, I think you view work and you view opportunity very differently. And as, as the son of immigrants or a young immigrant, I think that there's also this huge pressure to succeed and this huge pressure to become something greater than perhaps what your parents were. And I think that all of that influences, not just the book, but my day-to-day life.
Perfect. On that note, do you have any preferred Latin American author?
I read a lot of contemporary fiction. So a couple of authors that I love are Zoraida Cordova. She just released a fantastic book named The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina. I would highly, highly recommend that. Jamile Sayed Mendez, her book Furia came out last year. It was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. Fantastic book. Laken Zia Kemp, she also wrote a beautiful, beautiful contemporary book that came out this year. Those are three of my favorite authors.
Perfect. Back to you, Abdal.
Thanks, Pedro. Daniel, since it is McGill's homecoming, Let's turn our attention a little bit to back in the day when you were in school, though not that far back compared to me. Tell us a little bit about, some of your favorite experiences at McGill.
Of course, I would, looking back at McGill, I do think there were two things. The first is I grew so much in the sense that I learned about hard work and I learned about organization, and I remember at times just feeling so overwhelmed, and you have so many assignments, you have so many exams, you have so much to do. And I remember looking at my to-do list and thinking, like, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to study as well as I want to study for all of these exams? And I would tell myself, I'm going to do the best that I can with what I'm given. So if I had one day to prepare for 3 final exams, I was going to do, perhaps I wasn't going to be able to do all 3 perfectly, but I was going to be able to do all 3 at 75%. And perhaps I was going to be the best that I could do. And, I think that taught me a lot about just sometimes being hard on yourself and telling yourself, you know what, this is the best I can do, and that is okay. And funny enough, I remember Professor Holmgren. She was talking in class about articles that she had published, and she said, sometimes her editor would have to like grab it out of her hands because she just felt like she could always keep going and always improve. And that is true. I think that in writing and in so many fields, like, you can always do more. You can always do one more round of edits. You can always change this sentence or that sentence or rewrite the ending. And at times you have to tell yourself, I'm doing the best that I can with what I'm given. And if this is a moment to let go, this is a moment to let go. And that was a very, I think, valuable lesson I learned from my McGill years. And the second was the people. Like, honestly, I'm currently in Vancouver visiting two of my old friends from McGill. And I think that McGill is such a diverse school. And I got to meet, people from all over the world and make lifelong friends. And I think that is one of the most special things that McGill gave me.
Could not agree more. Just on that related note, again, when you were at McGill, clearly you're quite a resilient individual. You ensured that your process worked. You tried again and again, and look where you are today. If you were not to be an author, what would you have considered as an alternate career?
So that is the thing. I studied marketing at McGill, and I loved it. I honestly felt like it was a pretty good fit for me. I worked in marketing for 2 years after graduation. In Toronto, I found a job with a great company. Again, made really great friends, learned a lot. And I think I would most definitely still be in marketing, with the caveat that I would still be pursuing writing. I would still be trying my hardest to get published. And I do remember, I used to say, I don't know if I'm going to be a published author in 1 year or in 5 or in 10 or in 60, but one day it's going to happen. And so I think I would most definitely still be in marketing, but I wouldn't have stopped writing. I would still be at it.
Writing through marketing. And so I have one more follow-up question, just because there's a McGill Young Alumni event that's coming up around crafting your brand, the importance of storytelling in your career. And you, having started your career in marketing and are literally a storyteller, could you talk to us a little bit about the importance of storytelling, and what are some of the key takeaways or lessons that can be applied to individuals within their careers as to what they can do with their brands?
A phrase comes to mind. I believe it was Dolly Parton who said this, and she said, "Figure out who you are and do it on purpose." And I think that's so beautiful and that's so powerful. And, I think it really helps to ask ourselves, what's your objective? Do you want, and the clearer your objective, the better. Do you want to write a book and be published? Great. Do you want to get that promotion? Amazing. Then we have to ask ourselves, like, what is the story that we need to tell? Do you need to make it clear to your boss that you're hardworking and responsible and X? And so I think once you figure out who you need to be and who you want to be, then start doing it on purpose. Start getting up every day and slowly but surely making those small decisions that will help you prove that to yourself and to other people.
That is so simple and so powerful. I love it. We've written it down. Over to you, Pedro.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. So this one goes into titles. So how do you choose the title of your stories, and more importantly, I think when? So do you say from day one, oh, it's this title, or do you leave it untitled and then at the very end you say, this is the title? Tell us a bit more.
So for this book, it was originally titled The Unknown Life of Matt Garcia. And I liked that title. It also really comes down to marketing, because once you sign with a publisher, your marketing team is going to be like, well, is this title going to work or not? Like once it's on bookshelves. And so my publisher wasn't a big fan of that original title. And I was very happy to change it to whatever brilliant idea anyone came up with. And we brainstormed so many titles. And then my agent emailed me and he said, how about Indivisible? And there was something that resonated with me right from the start. There was something that I felt described my characters and described the story very beautifully. And so once we settled on that, and the publisher liked it as well, and the marketing team liked it as well. And so once we settled on that, I actually wrote a scene at the end of the book to kind of tie that word back to the relationship that my main character has with his family, and how they, despite being separated by circumstance and by a lot of things, how they are able to remain close and truly indivisible.
Perfect. Back to you, Abdal.
Yes, we're almost out of time, but there are a few questions we just really want to hit. So maybe we'll go through these quickly, Daniel. How many revisions of Indivisible did you end up making before it was published?
Oh my God. Well, there was one that I did on my own, one that I did with my agent, 3 that I did with my first editor, then another one with my new editor. There was probably like 8. And of those 8, I would say there were at least 4 like distinctly different versions, like with different endings and different characters and whatnot.
And when did you feel that you knew it was ready?
I think I go back to that example of, you never feel it's ready. You feel like there's always something. And even now, I think back on the book and I think, oh, I could have done that differently. But there comes a time when your editor tells you, you know what, this is good. And we gotta do it. We gotta just send it out.
I get that. All right. 2 final questions. As you grow and learn as a writer, would you ever consider going back to the first novel you worked on?
No. And the reason is I have so many stories that I want to tell. There are so many books that I want to write. And I feel like each book that came before served a purpose, which was it taught me a lot and it helped me develop as a writer. And now I want to, continue to write and continue to try new things.
All right, Daniel, final question for now. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on. What's next? So
it is another young adult novel. It is somewhat similar to Indivisible in terms of themes, in terms of audience. It is a standalone novel, so it's not a continuation to this first book. But it is a story, again, about immigration, about growing up too quickly, about family, and about kind of having a big weight on your shoulders when you're young.
I mean, it sounds like a must read. We'll all be there.
If all goes well, it'll come out in winter 2023. So in a little over a year.
And we'll be following on danielaleman.com.
Thank you.
Plug. I'll talk about it at the end too. Awesome. Daniel, thank you so much. That concludes our Q&A. We appreciate all the responses. And I think honestly, this could have gone on for the rest of the night and then some. So Daniel, we'd like to say, just the biggest of thank yous for you being here tonight, for writing such a wonderful book. We appreciate you sharing your story with us and giving us a taste of your journey as an author. We wish you continued success in everything that you do and look forward to reading your next book and also having you back here to talk about it.
Thank you so much for everything. And thank you everyone who joined us. I'm so, so grateful. This has been so wonderful.
Absolutely. For those of us like me who wish to continue following Daniel, the place to go is danielaleman.com. And I'm sure we'll all be there for his next book launch as well. To wrap things up, also would obviously like to thank Pedro for your leadership in launching what is sure to be an important avenue to further support McGill alumni. So thank you a lot for everything that you've done, Pedro.
Oh, thanks to the MAA. I'm just trying to fill a certain void that was left out because I was very involved in the student equivalent. So I'm just trying to recreate that same environment. But thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Pedro. And of course, to the incredible team at McGill who's making this possible: Kay, Stephanie, Craig, Vice Principal Weinstein, and everyone else working tirelessly this weekend to bring you At Home Homecoming. Thank you all so much. Speaking of which, I'd like to highlight one of the last, but certainly not least, bicentennial At Home Homecoming events this year. Tomorrow, the McGill Black Alumni Association will be hosting the Politics of Memory with artist Quentin Versetti. I encourage you to tune in if you're available. It's meant to be an incredible session. Before we part ways, I'd like to invite you to keep an eye on your inbox, connect with us on social media for more exciting events from the McGill Young Alumni and of course from the McGill Latino Alumni Society. As a reminder, if you missed any of the earlier At Home Homecoming events, you can access all of the event recordings at mcgill.ca/homecoming. That includes this year's BD lecture featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the link is in your comments. Thank you all again. Have a great rest of your evening, and please do stay in touch, okay? Be well.
Thank you so much.